Imagine knowing exactly what your students are learning and exactly which steps you need to take next.
Join us in Down with the Reading Quiz to craft meaningful and productive formative assessments that move away from gotcha moments of basic recall and toward assessing what your students actually can do.
In this 30-minute free masterclass, we'll share 3 powerful assessment keys that work for any novel at any time of the year.
Head to shop.bravenewteaching.com/masterclass to sign up, and we'll also send you a free workbook to keep track of all your notes.
Once again, that's shop.bravenewteaching.com/masterclass to nail formative assessments forever.
Hey, Amanda.
Hey, Marie.
What are you up to later? Want to join me for happy hour?
I'm all in.
And guess what's amazing? Our listeners and friends of the podcast can also join us because Brave New Teaching Happy Hour has officially launched. Cheers!
Cheers, everyone. We are officially hanging out a little bit longer after school with an extended, extra private podcast feed just for you.
Yes. Members of Happy Hour get extra 15 minutes of the podcast, give or take, because you know us, we run a little bit long. It's just kind of how we are. But if you would like to get in on this Happy Hour action, please join us. It is only $5 a month. Head to curriculumrehab.com/happy hour and get yourself signed up, because when you're there, Amanda, tell our friends what we do every month for our Happy Hour members.
I think my favorite part is coming up with a new free resource for our listeners every month. And then we pretty much break down that resource and how to use it. We also like to have guests on to do extended episodes and even Q&A that's just for you about that resource. It's really exclusive and super private just for you.
So if you are like us and you like hanging out, you like chit-chatting about all things that are teaching, teacher life, and everything under that umbrella, join us for happy hour and we will see you there. Bye.
Bye.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to Brave New Teaching. We have a seasonal episode for you today. If you're listening in real time, it is October 1st, and Amanda and I are just really looking for things to get excited about. We get really excited about Gothic literature, and we have called on some of our ELA teacher friends to help us talk through some fun and cool and engaging strategies for teaching Gothic literature. So this is especially a great episode for all of you ELA friends out there. If you are not an ELA friend, you might just hear a story that you want to read. So let's get started. Hi, Amanda. Happy October.
Hey, happy October. I've got a question for you, Marie.
Okay.
So if I were to reveal to you my 2 most massive fictional... Wait, I should back up because I was going to say fictional crushes, but the crushes are real. The men on the receiving end are fictional, but I really feel all of these feelings for these men. One, they.
I'm following.
I
Okay.
just want to know if you know what these 2 gentlemen have in common. One, the Phantom of the Opera.
Yeah.
Okay, the Gerard Butler version, of course.
Oh, okay.
And I'm not going to say number 2 because they're on the same exact level. Mr. Rochester. So Mr. Rochester is like a very similar looking version of the Phantom in my head. But what is it that these 2 gentlemen
have in common? Long black capes and a top hat.
And reclusive, problematic relationships with women. Yes, I would agree with you.
I'd go for costumes. I'm a visual. You know, what can I say?
I thought you were going to give me the literary nerd answer, considering we're talking about Gothic fiction today.
I know, but sometimes my drama teacher side comes out and I'm like, you said Phantom of the Opera, and I was like, lots of blood red roses and masks, obviously.
Capey. They're both capey. I think Mr. Rochester probably could have pulled off a mask too.
For sure. We probably should have sometimes, but...
Yeah, like both are not super attractive to begin with.
No.
But then they're like, their mind games and problematic, behaviors just make them that much more attractive. Guys, I do not need a recommendation for a therapist.
Yeah, Amanda, I feel like this is about to turn into a very different episode than we had planned, and you did not warn me about this one.
I do love dark, mysterious men. So I did marry one,
one
by the way.
that will lure you to the mystic basement of an opera house and take you on his gondola through the mist.
On like my third date with my husband, I don't want to use the word lured, but he did take me to his shop where he still works, and like the lights were on, and it was really kind of like a cave. But
was there a fog machine just to really like bring it all in?
No, but it was foggy. It was foggy that night. I remember that. Guys, you want to know how I met my husband? I went on Match.com and I typed in Latino male over 6 feet tall. And then he was the only search result in my area.
And he was wearing that half mask, and that's what sold it for you.
And had a striking body like Gerard Butler does in 300. It was crazy. It was such a bizarre coincidence.
We have got to start talking about
married at date 4. Yeah. Anyway, Gothic Lit is like my favorite thing in the whole world.
I love it.
Creative writing, and we would do like a 6-week unit on Gothic literature, and it was just so amazing. I know I can tell you guys before we hear from, we have some amazing friends today that are going to share their favorite lesson plans and ideas with you for celebrating this month and doing something fun with your kids, because they need a random break to do something fun.
Yep.
But my favorite activity I ever did with my students, this is so simple. You don't even need to plan it. And it would work really well with distance or hybrid, is you come up with a list of, let's say 10 Gothic litty types of events that could occur in a story. So here's what I do. I tell my kids, you're going to start writing and you're going to write the whole time. So we're going to write for 2 minutes and I'm going to give you a prompt to start. So the prompt might be, it was a dark and stormy night, go. And they just need to write for 2 minutes. When that timer goes off, I give them the next sentence. And so the next sentence might be, and then the lights went out. They have to write my sentence and keep going. And then we just repeat until we get somewhere really weird, and then share or discuss or publish them somehow. And it's such a fun writing activity. It's really good for the kids. Like, they'll be super engaged the whole time, and you can have fun with whatever the prompts are that you're giving. I like to kill people off. I'll be saying, I could have a sentence, and then he died, period. Like, go, keep going. They're like, what? I wasn't ready for them to die yet. And so they'll freak out on you.
That is
of
so
course,
fun.
They'll be really quiet if you're on a computer. All the whats will be muted, which is going to kill you a little bit. But anyway.
But you get to see their tiny little square, like, jostle up and down when they're like, what? I wasn't ready. That's so fun because,
simple.
And like, creative writing is so fun, but sometimes that fun gets taken away by intimidation. So chunking it up like that and making them follow you along makes it much more doable, and just like, and once again, community building, because everybody has to have those same elements, but they don't have to come up with it all at the same time. They can only come up with teeny little pieces as they go. It's so fun. I love that. I have one of my favorite Gothic lit lessons and activities that I do is actually like an auditory processing activity. So we watch, or actually I normally just turn the video off. We listen to a reading of The Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe. And before that, I will have done some sort of a mini lesson on mood and talking about how, what contributes to mood, the mood of this story. And I'm going to just tell them what it is: mysterious and suspenseful. And so as they're listening for different elements of the mood. They're listening for different character traits. And actually, I realized I should have said this before. This is a download that I have for you guys. It's a sheet that I have made with The Telltale Heart, and then they compare and contrast it to a modern or more contemporary, like scary or Gothic type story. And I have some ideas that I'll also put in our show notes to go along with this download. So it's a free download for you. It's a 2-sided sheet that is like a listening notes kind of a guide for listening to The Telltale Heart, and then listening to either the teacher reading or some sort of a recording of a more contemporary Gothic or creepy, mysterious type story. Students are listening for evidence that contributes to a mysterious or suspenseful mood in each of the stories. They're listening to for character traits and evidence of character traits in like 2 or more characters. And then the narrator, whoever the narrator might be, what is the narrator's tone and cite evidence statements from the story from both of the stories. It's super fun. And then after they listen, those are like their listening notes to each of the stories. It's a really fancy Venn diagram. Again, we're coming back at you.
Love it.
Those crazy 21st century strategies called a Venn diagram. It's got telltale heart on one side. It's got whatever that other story is on the other side, and a big question at the bottom. How does the modern or contemporary story maintain the mood and tone of mystery and suspense while appealing to a contemporary audience? So it's looking at audience appeal and that sort of a thing, looking at mood and tone, and it's really fun. And it's also fun because I like to turn off all the lights in the classroom and make the students, well, when I do this in the classroom, make students work by like battery operated tea light. It's the only thing they can use. Mood. Hashtag mood. So those are our quick little ones for you. Like I said, I have a free download if you head over to our show notes at bravenewteaching.com. But we are really not the stars of today's episode. Our amazing colleagues and friends are.
Are you ready? We have a Keeping the Wonder teacher who obviously everything Keeping the Wonder is about magicalness and all of these good things. We've got the guru of AP literature. She's here today to talk to us. We have middle school teachers who are crushing it at all different levels and grade levels. We have a college professor who also taught high school and specifically taught an entire senior level English class on villains. So this is the kind of lineup we have for you today. These are like miniature little, if you guys remember our teacher appreciation episode, it's kind of like that, like little vignettes of different lesson plans and ideas and ways to approach Gothic lit. Some people even have here like research into urban legends. So there's all different interpretations of Gothic lit and things to do in October. So we are super pumped, and I will give you more info about each person after the music.
Here we go.
You're listening to Brave New Teaching, a podcast for educators challenging the status quo. I'm Amanda, and I'm a high school English teacher in Illinois.
And I'm Marie, and I'm also a high school English teacher in Southern California. We're so glad you're here. Enjoy the show.
All right, guys, I am ready to introduce to you two fabulous educators, and both of them great friends of mine. One, an old friend that I used to get to work with at school every single day, and the other, a brand new friend that I am forming a wonderful friendship with online through the Instagram teacher community, which, as most of you have heard, is a fabulous place to be connecting with other educators. So first up, you're going to hear from Patrick Johnson. Patrick Johnson, like I said, we worked together at my high school. Patrick was not only a phenomenal English teacher, but he ran the show in terms of media studies and the journalism department at our building. Just absolute rock star stuff. We're here today to talk about, though, his senior level English courses and what he's done in terms of Gothic literature and his course all about villains in literature. He's done really cool stuff with urban legends. He's now currently at University of Iowa studying to get his PhD and teaching at the same time. Patrick can do it all, and he has got quite an eye for Gothic lit. Then I want you guys to hear from Vanita Grant. She is a fabulous educator, absolutely killing it in 8th grade. She is doing 8th grade English out in Los Angeles, California. This is her 19th year teaching English language arts. Can you believe it? That is true dedication. She's also, in her spare time, a lead teacher for the Teacher Support Institute at California State University, Dominguez Hills. So these two educators have got really fabulous things coming up. So let's listen on in.
Students appreciate the macabre. They adore true crime, they love monsters and blood and guts, and let's be real, horror films are on the top of their list when they're choosing something to watch on Netflix. Gothic literature encapsulates all of those things that make sense to them during adolescence. It's a time where experimentation, fear, and the unknown intersect in their everyday lives, And teaching them Gothic literature helps them realize that these are human experiences. They are a part of the human condition that have existed for centuries. They're not alone on top of that, because as they'll see and as they read during Gothic literature, difference exists. And in reading Gothic literature, they get to see what difference actually looks like. And that difference, it can and should be celebrated. And as a kid, as an adolescent, as someone going through what they're going through in high school, there might be something that's equally relevant, but nothing more important than finding stories that make them feel as though they too exist. And that's what Gothic literature does. My favorite lesson in Gothic literature was entirely an experiential one. I taught a senior literature course called Villains in Literature as part of our new revised literature options, hoping to mimic a more choice-based college opportunity for our seniors, especially as they started thinking about choices post-high school. In this course, which predominantly focused on modern imaginings of the Gothics, students transitioned from a deep reading of The Talented Mr. Ripley to a literature circle text that had some of the modern horror classics. Both units focused on elements of the Gothic in modern context. However, they also focused on a critical thinking of monstrous character or villain and how those can serve as windows or mirrors to our contemporary society. During this transition, the students embarked on a 2-week mini-unit on the role of setting, place, and imagery in Gothic traditions. To learn about this more intensely and at a much deeper level than previous years, we went to an area haunted house and conducted a textual analysis of the rooms of the house. Through this fieldwork, students were given a hands-on approach and opportunity to interact with a text. And then they were able to ultimately use what they learned to critically read and analyze the contemporary works that followed in their literature circles. It was a brilliant and unique opportunity, but the students were able to get so much out of it because they were actually able to see the text and live the text, rather than ultimately read the words of a novel. It made setting, place, and imagery relevant.
Hello, my name is Benita Grant, and on IG you can find me at Love Teach Repeat. I wanted to stop by the podcast to discuss my favorite lesson to do during the Halloween season. Even at the secondary level, I think that it's still important and beneficial to acknowledge and participate in seasonal activities, especially this year when we are, in my district, 100% distance learning until we don't know when. And I think the students, we're in week 6, and the students as well as myself are all longing for some of the traditional activities, spirit weeks, that we kind of align in our district with the seasons and holidays. And so my favorite lesson involves students taking on the roles of different disciplines. And we base it around the mystery and the gruesome story of The Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe. The story is so rich and so full of all the elements of a great story. You can dive into teaching students. It's probably one of my favorite stories to teach the elements of a story and character development and foreshadowing and tone and mood and inferencing. And there's just so many skills and standards that I can just layer for this particular activity. So what I would do is definitely do I'm trying to think of how to set the scene. So in my regular classroom, I would decorate the classroom and make it where the students would walk into a different atmosphere in a classroom transformation. So I think that with Bitmoji rooms, and we've been really creative about trying to think about how to create a space. So that part, I'm kind of excited as to how I'm going to recreate this scene for students as we read the story for our first read, our close reading of the story. I'm very kind of excited about just the idea of implementing or planning it. As the students go through, we'll do a close reading and then, again, we'll go through all the different literary devices and, identifying post style on one end. And we'll do that in a series of activities that I will walk the students through and we'll kind of discover together. Then what I really want to talk about is that the students will branch off into their group work. And so for this assignment, the students are going to do a TLAD, a Think Like a Discipline literature circle, in which they're going to reread the story from the perspective of a specific discipline. And so to keep up with this mystery and this like disturbing, gruesome tone of the story, I want the students to create teams. And in the teams or lit circles, they're each going to have a specific role or task that's going to be based upon a crime team or crime scene detectives. They've been hired, and we'll create the scenario. They've been hired to as a part of a legal defense, and they're going to all take on different roles. And the funnest part for me is to create the critical thinking pathway and to try to figure out what how I can make each discipline unique and special, and kind of tap the interest of students in saying, I think I might want to be that particular discipline. So this year, I'm going to expand it and have the kids I'm really big on student choice. So I want to have the students kind of have enough roles and pathways for students to be able to create what they're really passionate about. And so I'm going to have them think like a sociologist, like a crime scene investigator, like a forensic scientist, like a psychologist, like a sociologist, a journalist, a defense attorney, and I'll probably think of some more before I finish designing this lesson. And so those are the academic disciplines that the groups of 4 to 5, each person will decide which group they'll take. So again, I'll have about 8 choices for the students in a group of 4 or 5. So each student will be able to choose which role they want to take as a group. Once they go there, we're going to use the depth and complexity icons, Sandra Kaplan's, and content imperatives as our prompts. And so each student has a pathway and kind of critical thinking questions that I will create for them, and they will take notes and kind of go through the text. They also have a research component that they're going to do, and each person looks at the story and takes notes from that perspective or that lens. The group then has to convene and kind of discuss what they saw on that second reading based upon that perspective. And so the idea is that the students will be able to either help defend the case. It is going to be an insanity defense, and how are they going to help it hold up in court? And so they're either going to be assigned to be a part of a defense team or a prosecution team. And so we're going to take this very gory story, rich in all these literary elements, and the students will do that extension activity where they dive deeper into and get a broader view of the social, historical, political aspects of the story, and then kind of go into looking at how Poe created the story and what the impact is, and all along keeping this tone of horror during the Halloween season.
The next 2 guest educators that we have to introduce to you today are 2 of my absolute favorite English teachers who I have met on the internet, one of whom I've actually met in person. And, well, you guys have heard us gush about Ashley Bible here on this podcast before, because Ashley's Keeping the Wonder workshop is the reason that Amanda and I actually met. And this whole Brave New Teaching community is what it is and is here. So we owe a great debt of gratitude to Ashley, and she's a wonderful person, an amazing educator. Cannot wait for you to hear her just fantastic ideas that really wake students up, and they wake up their creativity, and she always has something really special to share. And then right after Ashley, we have Stacy Yamanishi from the Donut Leaven Teacher. Stacy's ability to connect with her students and the space she creates in her middle school ELA classroom for students to truly be themselves and to share their personal lives. And she shares herself in a way that's true and authentic. And she really is somebody, if you're not following both of these educators, you need to be. Cannot wait to share with you what they have today. Let's go for it.
Hello, this is Ashley Bible from Building Book Love, and I'm a high school English teacher who absolutely loves the spooky season. I do not have children of my own, so with my students, I use any excuse I can find to make things a little bit more special, like mom type things, such as adding in some spider webs and spooky decorations to the room. And I do this because it's fun for me, and it surprises the students a lot. Even though they are high school seniors, they appreciate all of my extra effort, and I love the look on their face when they walk in, and I'll have some really creepy ambient sounds going. I'll have the lights dimmed, and they're like, "Ooh, what are we reading today, Miss Bible?" Because they know it's going to be a little bit spooky, and I love that feeling. So I basically use any excuse I can to set the mood in my classroom for something spooky. It doesn't have to be in the fall season, but on Halloween Day especially, even though I don't mention Halloween, we definitely get really spooky. So what I did last year, this was a lot of fun. I had on a floating pumpkin ambient video going on. You can find these on YouTube. Just type in like spooky ambient sounds. I had that going. I had some spider webs on the desk. I had articles laid out, and the articles were about ghosts. And I'll give you a few of the titles you can look up. One was called Haunted, 11 Novels with Emotional Ghosts, and the other was called The Origins of Ghosts and Famous Accounts in Literature. And then we did some like essential questions such as what makes a good ghost story, why are ghosts so prominent in literature, and then we were doing Macbeth at the time, so I threw in something to tie to that, which was why did Shakespeare include Banquo's ghost? But you really don't have to be teaching Macbeth. There's so many different ways you can tie in the idea of a ghost, like emotional or in literature, into whatever you're reading. And then so after we did that, we listened to a podcast, and I love bringing podcasts into my classroom. It is my thing. I have several blog posts about it if you want to go see that. But anyway, this one is called Spooked. And the specific episode we listened to is called The Night Whistler. And they have a ton of options you can listen to. You do have to preview them. But The Night Whistler is just a really, really creepy ghost story. And they were so into it. The room was silent, and there was like everybody was kind of on edge, and we got so many good discussions after that, and we tied it all back to those essential questions like what about this woman's story made it a good ghost story, and different emotions that she might have been facing when she experienced this ghost. So anyway, that is my spooky addition to this podcast. I hope that you and your students have fun. Bye.
Hi, I'm Stacy, sometimes known as Donut Lovin' Teacher. I'm currently an 8th grade English teacher in the Los Angeles area, and thank you for having me. I'm so excited for this opportunity to share an easy-to-implement short story and activity that can engage all learners in some Gothic lit. Let me start by saying that in my first couple years of teaching, I was really reluctant to read many of the texts that were in our curriculum, just with the thought that they were written so long ago and they weren't going to be relevant or engaging to my students. Well, when it comes to spooky stories, let me set one thing straight. Middle schoolers love all the spooky vibes. So I quickly tossed out that idea that just because it's old, students won't enjoy it after reading The Monkey's Paw by W.W. Jacobs with my students. So the story, The Monkey's Paw, is about a man who makes a wish on a monkey's paw, even though a friend warns him that it's brought him lots of trouble, and he even tries to toss it in the fireplace to get rid of it. The story can create a pretty eerie feeling. You can read it with the lights off or have students bring flashlights. I really like to have groups of students come up with the perfect background sound effects to make while you're reading the story. The Monkey's Paw also lends to really great lessons and conversations about foreshadowing and mood. I found that mood can be a little tricky for students sometimes, but using the monkey's paw as an example of it can set a really strong foundation. So when I first taught this, I remember my sister was getting rid of a bunch of DVD cases. I know it was a while ago, that naturally couldn't let go to waste. So I challenged my students to make DVD covers for a movie rendition of The Monkey's Paw. After we discussed ways that authors and creators establish a certain mood or feeling for their audience, the focus of their work centered around making this perfect DVD cover that fit the mood of the story and gave off that eerie, suspenseful vibe. If you're looking for some role sheets students can use for this kind of activity, you can find it in my TPT, but really, whether you're online, hybrid, or in person, you can have students create social media advertisements using platforms like Canva, promoting this newest movie release of the story, and it'll be just in time for Halloween.
So these next two teachers you're going to hear from absolutely cover the spectrum of listeners that are out there right now. I want you guys to hear from Bryn Allison, better known as the one and only literary maven. You guys may know her or recognize her name from Instagram, from Teachers Pay Teachers, but probably you know Bryn as the host and moderator of the Secondary ELA, spelled with the number 2, NDARY, Secondary ELA, Facebook group and Twitter chat. She has been moderating that and curating spaces for teachers to discuss. Her membership list is massive, so I'm sure you're probably in her Facebook group or you've seen a Twitter chat run by her. Bryn is working in a 6th grade English language arts classroom. She's worked as a reading intervention teacher in the middle school level, and she's also worked at the high school level. Today you're going to hear from her a middle school idea for a lesson that really capitalizes on writing and the opportunities in this genre for drafting and rewriting and adding sensory detail. She's really got a lot of good ideas for you guys in that regard. You're also going to hear from the queen of AP literature. So we're going to go from 6th grade to AP Lit, the entire spectrum. And the one and only Susan Barber. She, you guys, is one of my absolute heroes. I met Susan a long time ago, virtually, but I love everything she has to share about education, her thoughts, and the way that she articulates the issues we face as educators and how to challenge students. I just really admire so much of her work. And Susan's lesson today is going to walk you guys through this really cool moment where she was struck with inspiration and a very teachable moment as she was working through Frankenstein with her AP Lit students and really trying to help students understand why Shelley is so descriptive and so committed to setting. So on a dark and stormy day in a place where Susan lives that's very rarely like that, if you guys have ever hung out around Atlanta, you know that it's hard to get a stormy day. She really just takes kids through this very cool lesson to get into the mind of why an author would use setting in the way that Shelley did in Frankenstein. Enjoy!
Hi, fellow ELA teachers. Bryn Allison, the literary maven here. I like to do a writing activity on Halloween because although I teach 6th grade, I still think that older kids should get to enjoy some of the holiday fun, just like the little kids. This year, as always, I'm pushing my students to write and rewrite, look at their word choice, choose stronger language, add sensory details. So on Halloween, the writing activity I do connects to those skill building activities. Last year, I had my students write 2-sentence horror stories, and that's what I'll be doing again this year. To set the mood, I pick out some spooky music from YouTube. There's a ton of choices on there. I start out introducing 2-sentence scary stories by showing students just a few examples. I show them one that uses dialogue, one that is fairly short, and one that has a little more description. I don't like to show them too many examples because then they'll struggle to come up with their own ideas. For that same reason, the examples I show them are not the spookiest either. I really want students' work to be better than the examples I show them. And you can find tons of examples online. After looking at examples, students brainstorm a plot for their 2-sentence story. They respond to a series of questions covering the who, what, when, where, and why. And then they write a first draft. Next up is peer revisions. Students swap papers with a peer who identifies places to add sensory details, possibilities for stronger language. After getting a peer's feedback, students write a second draft, which must be approved by me before they can write out and decorate a final copy. I put in this approval step mostly to just make sure nothing inappropriate is written. But last year, I also had to keep telling my students that their story wasn't actually spooky. I hope this inspires you to do something a little on the spooky and fun side with your students this year.
Hello, everybody. My name is Susan Barber. I am from Grady High School in Atlanta, Georgia. Thanks, Amanda, for letting me share with y'all today. So I call this exercise Writing Romantically with a capital R, as I always distinguish with my students. And this is something that I started last year. I don't know about you, but inspiration just hits like when sometimes like at the most unexpected moments. And I was walking into school, we're studying Frankenstein, we were reading Frankenstein. It was one of these days, it's not cold here, but it was gray and overcast and super foggy. And I thought, oh my gosh, like a cold and dreary night in November. Like this is exactly the kind of feeling that the day had. The same thing Shelley had been writing about. And one of the things that my students had a difficult time understanding or making a connection with was, why does Mary Shelley really use why is she describing, the setting so much? And I had done a lot of talking about this mirrors what's going on inside of the person, etc. But when I came in this day, I'm like, this is the day to really let them have a firsthand experience with the setting. So what we did is I told my students, I said, today's weather is really dreary. And also it's like, the end of October, 1st of November, a lot of you are dragging lately, like the reality of school had set in, college apps, I teach seniors, college apps had set in. And so I said, I feel like today's weather is really reflective of a lot of your emotional states. So I'm going to give you 10 minutes to go outside, and I want you to capture some type of image in today's quote setting in the weather, that you're capturing, just the feel, the mood that the weather was creating, so that it reflects your emotional state. And it also is going to showcase somehow, the weather, the setting. So those were the two components. And I said, you can also consider using props, whatever you want to use for inspiration. And think about Frankenstein, like some of these setting passages that have confused you. Like think about that and think about how you can showcase what's going on inside of you through taking a photograph outside. Now, this was last year when we were in the classroom. I still think it would work. It would be great virtually as well. Like we're 100% virtual here, and whatever I can do, to get students to share like pictures. Like I can see us doing this in a couple of weeks, and all of my students putting up different pictures that they've taken. And we have this like on a dock in our classroom. So when I open our virtual classroom through Zoom, like we're all of our pictures are in the same space, like just like in a classroom. So I love that added benefit of doing this assignment virtually. So then we went to part two. Part two was, now we've thought about like Shelley's diction, syntax, her nod to nature, and how these reflect the character's state of mind and soul. So what I want you to do is find some of Shelley's sentences that acts as a mentor text to you, and then you write a piece mimicking her style. And let's see what you come up with. So you're going to be writing romantically, capital R. And when you're finished with that, I wanted my students to do a 2 or 3 sentence summary of the moves that they made as a writer that were inspired by Shelley. I think this activity really helped my students understand why Shelley was writing, why she referred to setting, why she went back to that. It also gave us a way to dig in to her style and talk about her syntax and diction, because once they're in the writer's seat employing this, like, they really understand the tools and the strategies she uses as a writer. I am going to link pictures and everything on my website, aplithelp.com. If you're not an AP teacher, don't worry. Come on, check it out over there. There'll be slides ready to use, pictures, student samples. So thank you, and I hope all of you have a really good Gothic fall.
Well, friends, we cannot be more grateful for our guest contributors today. And I know that some of you are probably really chomping at the bit. You want to see more of what these amazing educators have. So if you head over to bravenewteaching.com, we have all of their contact information where you can find their blogs, their social media profiles, and more information about them on today's show notes, as well as that download that I mentioned earlier with the Telltale Heart and the listening skills, comparing and contrasting. All of that will be, once again, at bravenewteaching.com. Take a look at our show notes for today's episode. And we hope to see you guys posting some fun Gothic lit activities and lessons that you're doing with your class. And please tag us at Brave New Teaching on Instagram when you do so that we can give you shout outs and we can just keep growing this Brave New Teaching community. Speaking of which, if you have a moment, please leave us a rating and review on iTunes. It helps other teachers find us and become a part of this Brave New Teaching community, because you guys are awesome, and who wouldn't want to be with you guys who listen to this amazing podcast, if I don't say so myself.
When you guys head over to those show notes, make sure that you also connect with our friends today that we brought on this episode. Follow them on social media, tag them if you try one of their ideas. You can always reach out to these guys too, who are now de facto co-hosts of our podcast as well. They would love to be in touch with you. They're really amazing, active, and connected teachers. So make sure that you take the time to reach out to them if you were inspired by something that they shared today.
You guys have a wonderful day, and we will see you next time.